As a general overview for Metzora, discusses the purification process for one who contracts Tzaraat. Now remember our last parashah was about Tzaraat. It's about the same genre, same context, it's family of ideas and things. It's a continuation. What's interesting about this parashah is that we only have the separation here between Tzaraat and Metzora in non-leap years. So only in a leap year that you rush these Torah cycles together and you consolidate them as a dual Torah Parshat. Not germane to get any more detail. But if we're talking about the purification process here, skin maladies which are contracted as a result of engaging in forbidden gossip. Yes, you hear about Lashon Hara, which means evil rumor, evil eye, ill deeds, gossiping. It can really damage someone's reputation. People in the industry, if you're a public figure, can actually lose their job, lose their life, their welfare, everything else. Break us in marriages if you accuse someone of adultery. You don't have two witnesses there. So we want to consider that as well. And the symptoms of laws of house Tazria, in other words, the periods of quarantine where you're outside the camp. It's also indicated in the symptomology of various discolorations. We've spoken about this, like red, blue, orange, green, and things of that nature, typical of fungal infections. But following is a discussion of various ritual impurities, including the laws of menstruating women, nada, purification rituals for that. Important note I didn't add last parashah is that it's equivocated when a woman has childbirth. That is, the same rules apply for nada for that time of menstruation. Okay, so let's get started right now, and I will turn over to the Holy Chumash. Please open your Chumash or your Tanakh. If you're a Christian, you may refer to your Bible as the Old Testament. Anyway, we're continuing the book of Leviticus or Vayakra. The parashat will cover inclusively chapter 14, verse 1, and ending at chapter 15, verse 33. So beginning with the first aliyah, and that begins chapter 14, verse 1 through 12. It begins like the last parashot. And the Lord spoke to Moshe, saying, this is very authoritative and it's very important to understand. Many seculars out there, many atheists out there, despite the evidence, the preponderance of evidence out there that say these words are sacred and true and of divine origin, they make up all these explanation compromises that, the Torah, 5 books of Torah were written in the time of the Persian exile of the Jews. It was all made up. But it's very interesting when you read the books of the Torah, the preface says very clearly, God was doing the speaking, Moses was doing the listening, and Moses was echoing word for word what God was relaying to him. So in verse 2, this shall be the law of the person afflicted with Tzaraat. On the day of his cleansing, he shall be brought to the kohen. The kohen shall go outside the camp, and the kohen shall look and behold, and the lesion of Tzaraat has healed in the afflicted person. Okay, so when it says outside the camp, where is this? Okay, and you picture, you have the tabernacle. Inside the tabernacle is the Mishkan. You have the ascension altar, and you have other devices there. You have the Levitical priesthood. They have their tents immediately surrounding that tabernacle. Then you have the disbursement of the 12 tribes. Of course, you have 1 tent per family, and you have this surrounding the tabernacle, which is center point. But outside the final stake for the final tribal tent, you will see an outside area where they probably stood up tents specifically for these cleansing rituals, for quarantine against diseases. This is also once a year when they had the red heifer burnt offering, they would take the hide of the red heifer and they would burn it outside the camp. If you remember the story of Azarel, the scapegoat, where the goat would go outside the camp and die. Well, this is essentially about the same kind of framework we're talking about. So in verse 4, the kohen shall order, and the person to be cleansed shall take 2 live, clean birds, a cedar stick, and a strip of crimson wool and hyssop. Very interesting combination of ingredients here. Very symbolic. Just bear with me. Rashi goes into a little bit of details like this. Live birds, excluding birds that have fatal disease, whatever course. Live is something that, they're living naturally. Nature. They're not afflicted. You have to capture the bird, like a mother bird or something like that off its nest. It's not something that falls out of the tree, has broken wing. Okay. So it's very important here. Why are the birds included in the first place? Well, mockingbirds, if you ever heard of them, I don't know where you're at in the country, or in the world, but a mockingbird is a very popular native bird in the United States, and it literally chatters a lot. Okay, it can actually, like a parakeet, copies sounds and intonations of other birds and duplicate that. Okay, they can be very noisy. Starlings, for instance, are very noisy birds. Other birds are very more quiet, but this is what it's talking about. These birds were literally designed for people who had problems with gossip. I'll get into that in a moment. The kohen shall order, and one shall slaughter one bird into an earthenware vessel over spring water. So one bird shall be slaughtered, in which the blood would fall into an earthen vessel, a bowl or something, and then the live bird, you shall take it, and then with a cedar stick, strip of crimson wool and the hyssop, and along with the live bird, he shall dip them into the blood of the slaughtered bird over spring water. So you see, you have the blood from the sacrificed bird in the mixture of all the ingredients. Then you have a live bird that you're actually dipping into these ingredients too. So you think about the personification of sin, how the sin was transmuted literally into the animal that was alive, and the blood was the removal process and cleansing process of the sin, removing from the person's nefesh, from the soul. I thought this was very interesting. He shall sprinkle 7 times upon the person being cleansed from Tazria. 7 is a holy number of God. And he shall cleanse him. He shall then send the live bird into open field, okay? Like the goat, like the scapegoat that I mentioned on Yom Kippur. So the person being cleansed shall then immerse his garments, shave off all his hair, immerse himself in water, and become clean. And this he may enter the camp, but he shall remain outside his tent for 7 days. So in other words, he can intermingle with his relatives, but he cannot go into his tent. Maybe there were guest tents and things like that. You think about travelers, like when Jethro and his family came to visit Moses, they had to have a place for him to be. There were probably extra tents there. In other words, this is what was happening because this is part of the cleansing ritual. It's interesting that the gentleman had to be shaved because you think about what happens in the hair and things like that nature. You could have blisters, you could have sores that could escape the inspection of the kohen priest. So when everything is shaved off, you can see that the skin is baby smooth and clean, and there's no issues of sin. This is very important here, okay? People get all kinds of diseases today. I mean, you're vaccinated. When I was in the military, I had to be vaccinated against an entire array of possible viruses and bacterium and things of that nature. If you go into Africa and the Middle East or Latin America, you may have to get an anti-malaria injection or take those pills and things of that nature. When you're in Iraq war in the Middle East, like I was, you had to take anthrax inoculation vaccines for that too. Well, the reason why we have to do this in a modern world is not just because of sin, because the world is affected and cursed in the process too. Remember, if you keep God's holy covenant, The only time you get sick, and only time you get a runny nose, and the only time your shoes wear out, and the only time your clothes come in disrepair, and the only time you have these blisters and these sores and these lesions that appear to be like leprosy but not leprosy, then you know that's something that you need to confess to the Kohen priest. This is the sole purpose of, generally speaking, of the teaching of this section in Barakah in the book of Leviticus. Just a moment. Continuing on. So in verse 10, on the 8th day he shall take 2 unblemished male lambs, and on one unblemished ewe lamb in its first year, 3/10 of an ephah of the fine flour you can find, mixed with olive oil as a meal offering, and 1 log of olive oil. Okay? So when you talk about ewe lamb, well, this is 1 male lamb and 1 ewe lamb were to be sacrificed, one as a burnt offering and one as a sin offering. Remember how these go together here. One is burned completely, one is a sin offering for offering between the Kohen priest and the person that is offering the sacrifice. Although the scripture does not specify which animal was for which sacrifice, however, since a female animal is never brought as a burnt offering, very interesting, Leviticus 1, chapter 1, verse 3, it is obvious that the ewe lamb was to be sacrificed as a sin offering. 3/10 of an ephah, well, for libations, like adding oil or wine and things of that nature in a mixture, like a flour mixture, to accompany that. You have of the 3 lambs for offering and guilt offering, the sin offering and the guilt offering of 1 stricken with Tazria of required libation. So there's additional attention to detail here in the ingredients and the formula here for cleansing rituals. So in verse 11, and the Kohen who is performing the cleansing shall place the person being cleansed together with these things before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So now you have a process here. You have someone who's in a quarantine tent outside the camp. You have someone who's contracted Tzaraat, some sort of infectious disease, okay? And then you have the Kohen priest coming there every 7 days. So, and then the person, once he's pronounced cleansed and is shaved and goes in a mikvah, then he's allowed to intermingle in the camp. Now at this point, once the sacrifice has been offered, he's allowed to come to the tabernacle. So the Kohen shall take 1 lamb offering and bring it as a guilt offering along with a log of oil and wave them waving the Lord. So all these things are prerequisites for the person to even come to the tabernacle, to bring the sacrificial animals there for the finalization of the cleansing ceremony. Continuing on, we're still in chapter 14, verse 13. He shall slaughter the lamb in the place where one slaughters the sin offering and the burnt offering in a holy place. Okay? For regarding the Kohen service, the guilt offering is like the sin offering. It is in the Holy of Holies. So it's very interesting. So a little explanation from Rashi, bear with me. In the place where one slaughters the sin offering and the burnt offering, namely on the side of the copper altar at the north of the sanctuary courtyard. But what is this verse teaching us? Well, was it not already stated regarding the law of the guilt offering in the Parshah of Tazria? That the guilt offering was required to be slaughtered to the north side. This is actually where you sprinkle the blood on the 4 horns of the ascension altar, remember? Toward the Holy Holies. But since the guilt offering differs from the other, this particular guilt offering is different, for cleansing, is different insofar that it requires placing together with one bringing it. One might think of the animal should be slaughtered where it's placed. Well, not so. In the scripture, it elaborates that he shall slaughter the lamb in the place where one slaughters the sin offering and the burnt offering. Okay, simple explanation there. In verse 14, we read that the Kohen shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the kohen shall place it above the cartilage of the right ear of the person being cleansed. There, you heard right. On the thumb of his right hand and on the big toe of his right foot. Very interesting, okay? I bet you the Canaanites did not have a ritual this unique, okay? But just think about what it indicates here, okay? Of course, the cartilage is the middle wall of the ear, okay? The thumb is the thumb and the big toe is the big toe. So it's interesting how some of the blood for the guilt offering needs to be placed on these three parts of the body. So in verse 15, and the kohen shall take some of the log of oil and pour it into the kohen's left palm. The kohen shall then dip his right index finger into some of the oil that is his left palm, and then sprinkle some of the oil with his index finger 7 times before the Lord their God. And when it says before the Lord, this means before the Holy Holies, okay? Facing to the north. So, and some of the remainder of the oil that is in his palm, the kohen shall place on the cartilage of the right ear of the person being cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on top of the blood of the guilt offering. Verse 18, and what is left over from the oil that is the kohen's palm, he shall place it upon the head of the person being cleansed. And the kohen shall effect atonement for him before the Lord. Understand, at this finalization of this ritual within the tabernacle, these burnt offerings, these anointings and things of nature, if it was not followed step by step precisely, the whole process had to be reset. It could even lead to the individual coming there to be cleansed had to go through another 7-day investigation on cleanliness. Okay, you would not want to go through that. The detail in this, folks, and the rituals and the ingredients and the precise step-by-step procedures here indicates divine intent and logic and reasoning why these had to be followed like this. If it appears as nonsensical to a human mind, you know it has to come from God, because our wisdom is not the Lord's, right? So in verse 18, what is left over in the oil and the kohen's palm, he puts his hand upon the head of the individual to seal the offering, close the deal with the Lord, open a new covenant of cleanliness and righteous living. So the kohen shall perform the service of the sin offering and effect atonement of person being cleansed in the uncleanness. And this he shall slaughter the burnt offering. Okay? So the kohen shall bring up the burnt offering and meal offering to the altar. The kohen shall thus effect atonement for him, and he shall be completely clean. Okay? Now, I would be amiss if I didn't point this out, okay? Christians to say over and over and over again that there's no forgiveness, no remission of sins, unless you have the shedding of blood. Now, what I just described to you is a cleansing ritual of incidental sin, not sin of premeditation, but sins of omission, okay? It's just simple things, okay? Touching the hide of an animal you thought was kosher, then you find out it was not kosher, right? If you not report that directly to the kohen priest and kept it yourself, and you kept on doing that kind of behavior, you could have Tzaraat, right? This is about incidental sin, forgetting to wash your hands before you eat for Shabbat. Omission of other things that you know that you were trained and taught as a child, you forget to do. Just being, just being a scatterbrain or whatever. It can lead to these things. And if you know that these were such a big issues back 3,500 years ago, you know for a fact how big a problem it is for the Jew living in diaspora when we don't even have a certified red heifer or a temple for burnt offerings. Just consider that, okay? So what do we do when we don't have all these devices in the temple and everything else? We give charity. Read Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 21, 23 for that form of atonement. So what's deliciously sweet, Hashem has a plan for both poor and rich, okay? So if he is poor in verse 21 and cannot afford these sacrifices, he shall take one male lamb as a guilt offering for waving an effect atonement for him, and 1/10 of an ephah of flour mixed with oil as a meal offering, and a log of oil. Okay? So it's a more simple procedure based on the position of person in life. Okay? So verse 22, and 2 turtle doves and 2 young doves, according to what he can afford. Very important that this phrase is here. And one shall be a sin offering, and one shall be a burnt offering. Again, these are sins of omission, not commission. Verse 23, and he shall bring them on the 8th day of his cleansing to the kohen in the inch of the tent of meeting before the Lord. Okay? Remember, 7 days you remain in your tent or remain outside of your home tent, in which on the 8th day you come before the kohen and offer the animals and the flour and things of that nature to the kohen priest to atone the sin for you in this ritual. Okay, then verse 24, and the kohen shall take the guilt offering lamb and a log of oil, and a kohen shall wave them as a waving before the Lord. Literally, you take a quarter of the animal, and you would wave it in the air above the sacrifice and make these declarations, okay? As if you needed to get the Lord's attention, okay? When I was in Japan, people would ring bells, and they would shout and everything else before the Buddha statues, and other things there in order to get the attention of the Spirit. God does not need us to ring a bell, blow a shofar to get his attention. The waving of the animals, a quarter, the piece of meat or whatever, part of the sacrificial offering process was, remember, the people were watching this too. So it was as a witness to them. Verse 25, he shall slaughter the guilt offering lamb, and the kohen shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering and place it again on the cartilage of the right ear, the person being cleansed, and the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe, right foot. And the kohen shall then pour some of the oil into the left palm of the kohen, and the kohen shall sprinkle on his right index finger some of the oil in his left palm 7 times before the Lord. Incidentally, I took my beloved wife underneath the chuppah, and she circled me 7 times. 7 is a righteous number of the Lord. And the kohen shall place some of the oil that is in a palm on the cartilage of the right ear, and the person being cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and the big toe of his right foot, on the place of the blood offering. And what is left over the oil and the kohen's palm, he shall place upon the head of the person being cleansed. Okay, and declaring this before the Lord their God, from what he can afford, on as a sin offering, and one is a burnt offering besides the meal offering, and the kohen shall effect atonement for the person being cleansed before the Lord. This is the law of one whom there is a lesion, a blister, a wound of Tazria, who cannot afford the full array of sacrifices when he is cleansed. What I just read you is almost identical, but with a couple of variances there for the use case for someone who cannot afford the greater sacrifices. Okay, the 4th aliyah, okay? Again, in chapter 14 of Leviticus, Vayakra, in verse 33, and the Lord is speaking to Moses and Aaron together. Before, God was speaking just to Moses. So in verse 34, when you come up to the land of Canaan, which I am going to giving you as a possession, and I place a legion of Tazria upon a house in the land of your possession. Interesting, the house is involved here. And one to whom the house belongs comes and yells Kohen, saying, something like a legion has appeared to me in the house. The Kohen shall order that they clear out the house before the Kohen comes to look at the legion, so that everything in the house should not become unclean. Okay, so there was a deadline to be able to reporting a problem, and then taking the items out, or all the items may have to be destroyed. So after this, the Kohen shall come and look at the house. This is something I'm trying to drive home to you, okay? A house is just a physical structure, right? 4 walls, a roof, a foundation. But your house is actually part of your life. In a Jewish context, we have a mezuzah. For those people that are not Jewish, a rectangular box. has a little mini Torah within it, and has the sacred name of God on that Torah scroll. Okay? We have a mezuzah at the portal of every living space in our home. We declare this to be holy before God. So when it's not just you yourself, you can take sin upon yourself on the inside, but you can also take sin, bring something evil and unclean in your home, like again, something you found at a thrift sale. I'm joking. You find something bartered and traded. It had a small little symbol on it that was from a pagan god worship, and you just omit that. You put that one little vase or something in your house, the whole place can be unclean. It's interesting, even to this day, when we buy things from Amazon, it comes out from all over the world, okay? I bought my wife a beautiful brass Turkish tea set. Well, that whole thing, their labels and stickers and thing, you have to take them completely off. And then we had to tovel it. We had to put it and dip it 7 times. We had to dip it in a mikvah of water to cleanse it. This same thing impacts Jews today in the 21st century. Okay? So verse 37, he shall inspect the lesion, which is an opening in the wall in the tent. Tent is made from animal hide, right? So he looks at the walls and inspects them for the existence of dark green or dark red sunken looking stains appearing to be deeper than the wall. Okay? You literally have fungal growth on the interior of the tent of your home. Okay? And you see this growth, it may be coming up from the ground, it may be occurring from the apex of the tent, going down, I'm not sure. So in verse 39, the kohen shall return on the 7th day and look at the house. Now, sometimes when the kohen priest orders a quarantine of the house for 7 days, they remove everything that does not have any evidence of Tzaraat on it, or the colorful growths that are within the home. He comes back and see if the whatever was removed was impactful negatively to the house. Now, the house may have cured itself, okay? Anyway, they return after 7 days to look and examine the walls very carefully, maybe with a candlelight. So the kohen shall order that they remove all the stones upon which the lesion found, and they shall cast them away outside the city to an unclean person. So if the lesion is spread, even the stones, which is the foundation of the family dwelling, have to be removed outside the city, because even the stone, maybe it could have some sort of engraving or some mark or something, maybe a blood of an unkosher animal on it. I don't know. Okay, these are all lessons of righteousness and holiness. When God says, I'm in your midst, in the ground that I touch, and I'm interacting with you, and you're in the flesh, and your souls in your life, you are either holy as I, and you're as clean as I, or you're unclean. And God cannot tolerate unholiness and uncleanness in his midst, okay? So the process in verse 41 is, he shall scrape out the house from the inside and out. Hear about spring cleaning. Well, my wife does a lot of spring cleaning, getting ready for Parshat coming up. And they shall pour out the mortar dust from what they scraped outside the city on the place. All the cleaning the entire tent was taken down. The foundation is uprooted. All the foundation stones were removed. The ground and everything else. All this is very important, because that was a part of real estate that belonged to the person, right? Verse 42, and they shall take other stones and bring them instead of those stones. So all the stones were replaced. Then they add mortar to like bricks to join the stones back together. Okay? So they put the tent back on the foundation and see if the lesion erupts again and spreads, okay? So there could have been something in the plaster, something in the ingredients, I don't know. Verse 44, then the kohen shall come and look, and the lesion in the house has spread. It is a malignant Tazria, if you hear about malignant cancer in the house, and is unclean. Well, in the worst case scenario, he shall demolish the house, its stones, its wood, and all the mortar and dust of the house. He shall take them outside the city to an unclean place, okay? That's outside the camp of Israel. Hopefully it does not get to that point, okay? These are lessons. I don't know how often this level of severity occurred, but it was enough for God to make a point to the Jewish people that they need to pay attention to every single decision that they make in their lives, okay? Because it's either positively impactful or negatively impactful. Verse 46, and anyone entering the house during the days of quarantine shall become unclean the next evening. Verse 47, and whoever lies down in the house shall immerse his garments, and whoever eats in the house shall, just like COVID, okay? If you're infectious or whatever, you spread something, contagious disease, you could be impactful. You have to be tested negative before you can interact again in public life. These same things apply back then, 3,500 years ago, okay? So in verse 49, to ritually cleanse a house, he shall take 2 birds again, the cedar stick, strip of crimson wool, and hyssop. He shall slaughter 1 bird in an earthenware vessel over spring water. And he shall take the cedar stick again, this is a repeat, the hyssop, the strip of crimson wool, and the live bird, and he shall dip them into the blood of the slaughtered bird into the spring water and sprinkle toward the house 7 times. Okay? These are declarations before the Lord God. This is a Kohen priest doing this, representing as an emissary of God, okay? Temporarily, this priest actually became Elohim and the image of God and service of God and taking care of these quarantine people and items to bring them to spiritual purity. So the live bird, be sent away outside of the camp. Hopefully, as a symbol that the bird is still alive and free of any kind of disease. Fifth aliyah. I will rush through this for your benefit. I'm also reviewing in my Hamash any relevant commentary from Rashi that may be important. Needful. So in verse 54, chapter 14, and this law for every legion of Tazria and for the afflict, okay, and the Tazria and garments and houses, and for the saif and the sabchaf and the bachara, to render decisions regarding the day of uncleanness and the day of cleanness. This is a law of Tazria. These are different types of discharges from wounds, the brightness, different Hebrew transliteration for these things and meanings for this, okay? And chapter 15, and the Lord our God was speaking to Moshe and Aaron, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, if any man has a discharge from his flesh, okay? Don't want to gross you out, but this happens, okay? Blisters and things like this literally have water and blood underneath the raised skin. Okay, this is what it's talking about. In verse 3, and this shall be a nation of all uncleanness due to the discharge. If his flesh runs his discharge, his flesh is plugged up with discharge, that is a form of uncleanness. Any bedding this discharge can touch is a form of uncleanness. Folks, just think about this scientifically. Other than the metaphysical, Kabbalistic kind of aspects of this, philosophical, think about science. Think about medical science. If you have someone who has a wound, who has a disease or whatever, and what if you hurt your leg and you have a cut or something, a bruise, then you have bleeding and you have liquid and things like that. You don't want to spread this infection to other people, right? And this is what God is trying to teach them. You have to know that you have infections from the world and you have infections from the spiritual realm as well. And you have all this dichotomy of things happening both between the earthbound plane and the spiritual plane. Verse 5, and the man touches the bedding, shall immerse his garments, immerse himself in water. This is spring water, this mikvah water until the evening, okay? So it makes sense. If you have a wound and you're sick and you have a wound treatment, we do this with medical care professionals too. The cleanliness is very important. Washing the wound, bandaging the wound, checking the bandage, the same process here, okay? So verse 7, if anyone touches the flesh of the person, they are temporarily unclean in the next evening too. But it can be resolved quickly without any kind of burnt offerings or sin offerings in these spot infectious scenarios where you touch something unclean by accident. a small fraction of it, whatever, and you wash yourself in a mikvah and you're pronounced clean. This is just acknowledgement, handshake, and what's happening, okay? This is what you do in a community, in a village. Yeah, everyone has to cooperate. So, and any riding gear, like on a camel, whatever, can be unclean too. Verse 10, whoever touches anything that will be underneath him becomes unclean until the evening. Your undergarments and things of this nature, and whoever the man with the discharge touches, and latter rinsing his hands shall immerse his garments also until the next evening. If you shake someone's hand and they're unclean and they have some running discharge, then you're unclean. Okay, this is where it goes. You know what they say about using alcohol, soap. You know how they say we're using rubber gloves or whatever. Cleanliness is next to godliness, right? So in verse 13, when a man with the discharge is cleansed, and his discharge shall count 7 days for himself in the purification, he is to finally immerse his garments, immerse the flesh in spring water, and he shall be clean. To be safe and sure. Verse 14, on the 8th day he shall take for himself 2 turtle doves. So all this process of uncleanness and everything, this is about discharge, okay? It is about fluidly discharge from the Tzaraat or wounds in general, okay? So you have a different kind of offering for that. So the kohen shall take them into, one into a sin offering, one a burnt offering, and the kohen shall effect atonement for him from the discharge before the Lord their God, okay? God has a plan. He has a redemption plan for everyone, no matter what their situation or stature in life, okay? Verse 15, it talks about conjugal relations between a man and his wife. It talks about when you want to have a baby, you want to have children, that their process of uncleanness arise with that as well. Okay, anytime a woman cohabitates with a man, there is a problem with uncleanness, without going into a lot of details here. Okay, you can read about this in Leviticus chapter 15, verse 16, verses all the way to 28. This whole section is here. When you have conjugal relations with another person, of course, this is in the context of married people having children, issues with nada. Sometimes a woman may incidentally bleed or have discharge multiple times in a month. Every woman's different, biologically speaking. It's based on hormones. Don't want to get into details, but the garments can be touched by this. There's diseases that can happen, bacterial-related diseases. This is all teaching about cleanliness. We want to be clean, right? We want to be clean before the Lord God, because on the 7th day is Shabbat, right? And we all take a bath, on Friday before Shabbat, or before sunset. We all had to lay out our best garments, all the cleanest garments before the Lord, in a virtual representation of going before the temple of God in our synagogue shul services, okay? So skipping to the 7th Aliyah here. Chapter 15, reading verses 29 and 33. And on the 8th day she shall take herself. This is actually quite sweet. Picture a young maiden, a young woman who has children, is cohabitating with her husband. They're married, and issues of cleanliness happen. Literally every time you try to have a child, you literally need to go to this cleansing thing. That means a lot of turtle doves. I'm joking aside. But on the 8th day, always the 8th day after Shabbat, shall take for herself 2 turtle doves and 2 young doves, and bring them to the kohen, the entrance of the tent meeting. Kohen shall make one a sin offering. He would dedicate and designate that. One's a sin offering, one's a burnt offering. I don't know if it's a throw of a dice or a spin of a dreidel to decide what. I don't know. And a kohen shall effect atonement for her before the Lord from uncleanness from her discharge. Okay, that's what it says literally. And verse 31, and she shall separate, she shall temporarily be separate from the children of Israel for uncleanness, and so that they will not die on account of their uncleanness, if they defile my sanctuary, which is in their midst. Okay, think about this out of it. There was an issue of concubines during this time, when your wife, when you get older, your fertility, your infertility does not become as much issue as a woman in her 40s. Okay, so what you happen, you may have a cousin of your wife, you may have a concubine, and you want to have more children. Maybe you didn't have a lot of children. That this happened with Yaakov and Leah and Rachel. These kind of things happen. Even Abraham got married after Sarah, blessed memory, to another woman and have more children with them. What I'm saying is, a man may be procreating multiple times with different mates in order to grow the household of Israel. So there was a lot of issues of cleanliness going on, and everyone's situation was unique. Okay, this is not about prostitution. This is not about harlotry and Israel. Even though that was an issue before in the time of Pentecost, I'm not getting into that. But this issue of cleanliness, the woman that's impacted from this, she's carrying a level of uncleanness that is quite severe. And anything that she takes with her and touches, okay, could cause other people to get sick. Literally, that's what they're saying. So anyway, she should separate herself from the uncleanness, like a temporary quarantine. You have nadah and childbirth and things like this, until the cleanliness. And sometimes the priest may not be ready. Okay, it may take longer to do this. But it says that so she will not die on account of her sin. Again, this is sin of uncleanness, okay? This is the law for one who has a discharge, okay? And issues with men as well, though which becomes unclean. It's interesting, it looks like the woman carries not only the sin of her uncleanness, but get this, she carries the uncleanness of her husband too. A woman represents her family. She is literally the neck of the family, and she's saving the family from potential issues of uncleanness. I think it's quite remarkable when you consider these details here and how it relates to this. Some of it's a little bit comical too, but there's rules for everything, for our behavior. Again, it's not about the individual all the time. It's about a village. We have to learn how to interrelate with other people. Jews living in a diaspora, like in America, I may live in a Jewish enclave known as an Arab, but there are Gentiles that live with me. They have different practices. They're alien to me. They touch things that are unkosher. You have to be careful when you have people come in your cleansed home. You dedicate before the Lord your God to be kosher and clean. You need to make sure there's cleaning rituals with that too. Most people I know, whether they're Christian, Buddhist, or whatever, if I interact with them, they know I'm an Orthodox Jew and they respect me for that. They would never ever bring any food or anything like that to my home that's unkosher. Okay, that's just the way it is. But anyway, wrapping this up, God bless you. I just want to wish you all the blessing of the Lord your God. We are hopefully post this COVID pandemic, this latest pandemic that we went through the last 2 years. But there's a lot of things we could have applied 2 years ago if Dr. Falsey would have read the Parshah and Vayakra, Tazria-Metzora, right? All kidding aside. Shalom Aleichem, ben-Emmett signing out. God bless you. If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.